The carriage advanced slowly through the dark moors of England, cutting through the dense fog that enveloped everything in a shroud of mystery. The young governess, Emily Carter, watched through the window as the mansion approached. Majestic and desolate, its Gothic architecture stood against the gray sky like a sleeping giant. The stone walls were covered with moss, and the windows, veiled by dusty curtains, seemed like closed eyes guarding ancient secrets. The year was 1897, an era marked by scientific advances and a growing interest in the occult. The mansion, isolated amidst the moorland desert, exuded an aura of decadence and mystery. The gardens, once lush, were now neglected, with wildly overgrown shrubs and broken statues that seemed to silently observe intruders. As she stepped down from the carriage, Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The cold wind cut like knives, and the sensation of being watched made her look around, though she saw no one. She took a deep breath, trying to dispel the unease, as she headed to the mansion's main door. Little did she know that this house would become a living nightmare, where the vengeful spirits of the family who tragically died there still roamed the dark corridors, eager to reveal their buried secrets. The heavy door creaked open, revealing an interior shrouded in gloom. The air was thick with the smell of mold and old memories. Emily hesitantly stepped inside, feeling that from that moment on, her life would change forever. As soon as Emily entered the mansion, she was greeted by the butler, Mr. Harris, a tall, slender man with severe features and a piercing gaze, who seemed to know more than he said. His face was marked by time, and his hands trembled slightly as he held the lantern. He led her through the dark, cold corridors, where every step echoed like a ghostly whisper. In the main hall, shadows danced on the walls, cast by the flickering flames of old candles. It was there that Emily met the children, Sarah and Thomas. Sarah, 10 years old, was a pale and silent girl with large, sad eyes that seemed to hide deep suffering. Her brother, Thomas, 8 years old, was more energetic, but there was something in his gaze that suggested an unsettling wisdom for someone his age. Sarah kept close to Emily, watching her with a mix of curiosity and fear. Thomas, on the other hand, seemed intrigued by the new presence, incessantly asking questions about her previous life. Emily tried to comfort the children, promising to take good care of them, but couldn't help but notice the furtive glances they exchanged, as if they shared a terrible secret. Besides the children, there was the cook, Mrs. Green, a robust and superstitious woman. She constantly muttered about strange things happening in the mansion and made the sign of the cross whenever she passed certain places. Mrs. Green's presence, though comforting in her practical manner, brought with it a sense of discomfort and fear of the unknown. The dynamic among the characters was complex. Mr. Harris maintained a distant and reserved posture, as if always watching, while Mrs. Green, with her superstitious beliefs, added an air of mystery and impending danger. The children, especially Sarah, seemed to be under a constant shadow of fear and sadness, something Emily was determined to understand and, if possible, dissipate. But as night fell and the shadows lengthened, Emily could not ignore the growing sensation that something or someone was always watching, waiting. The mansion, with all its hidden secrets and horrors, began to reveal its true nature. Darkness enveloped the mansion like a heavy cloak, and the only illumination came from the candles Mr. Harris had distributed throughout the house. Emily carried a lantern as she climbed the main staircase, her steps echoing through the empty corridors. Each step creaked, as if the house lamented her presence. Upon reaching the top of the stairs, she was led to her room, a small, austere space with old furniture and a large window overlooking the ruined gardens. On the first night, The exhaustion from the journey overcame her, but sleep brought no rest. She woke several times, startled by whispers and inexplicable noises coming from the corridors. Upon opening the door to investigate, she found only darkness and oppressive silence. Back in bed, she tried to convince herself they were just the natural sounds of an old mansion, but the unease did not leave her. In the morning, Emily began her duties. The daily routine helped distract her mind from the strange events of the night. She got to know the children better, and while they played in the garden, she noticed that Sarah avoided certain areas and always seemed alert. Thomas, on the other hand, explored bravely, but with a strange familiarity with the darker places. One afternoon, while exploring the mansion's library, Emily found an old, dusty book. Opening it, she discovered it was a diary written by a woman named Eleanor Hawthorne, the former lady of the house. The pages were filled with disturbing accounts of mysterious deaths and ghostly apparitions. Eleanor described a growing sense of despair and fear, mentioning that the mansion was cursed. Intrigued and frightened, Emily decided to delve deeper into the Hawthorne family history. She felt that the key to understanding the strange events lay in the pages of that diary and the secrets buried within the mansion structure itself. But as she dug deeper into the mysteries, the supernatural events intensified. That night, as she prepared to sleep, Emily heard the sound of soft footsteps outside her room. She slowly opened the door and saw a vague figure at the end of the corridor, seemingly floating in the air. When she tried to approach, the figure vanished like smoke, leaving a chilling cold in the air. Emily returned to her room, trembling, realizing that the mansion had much more than just hidden secrets. It had a malevolent presence that would not rest until it was acknowledged. The next morning, Emily woke up with a sense of exhaustion, as if the night had been an invisible battlefield. As she descended for breakfast, she found Sarah sitting at the table, with a distant and somber look. Thomas was as curious as always, but there was a palpable tension in the air. The following days brought more disturbing signs. Doors closed by themselves, locked windows were found open, and candle lights flickered inexplicably. One night, Emily heard childish laughter echoing through the corridors, but upon investigating, she found only the children's rooms, in silence. Sarah began to have frequent nightmares, screaming at night about a lady in white who came to her room. Emily tried to comfort her, but each account was more disturbing than the previous one. Sarah described the woman with a torn veil, empty eyes, and a chilling presence that made the room feel like a tomb. While cleaning the rooms, Emily found old toys in one of the closets, apparently forgotten long ago. One doll in particular caught her attention. It had glass eyes that seemed to follow her movements. When she questioned Sarah and Thomas about the toys, they denied knowing any of them, increasing the mystery even more. One night, as she passed through the main hall, Emily saw a shadow moving in the distance. She stopped, her heart racing, and called out to Mr. Harris but got no response. Following the shadow, she reached the library, where the books on the shelves seemed to vibrate slightly. Suddenly, Eleanor Hawthorne's diary fell from the shelf, opened to a specific page. The entry spoke of a tragedy that occurred in the house, the death of a child and Eleanor's subsequent madness. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. It was clear that the current events were somehow connected to past tragedies. The house was not just a scene of old misfortunes. It was alive with the memories and sufferings of those who died there. Determined to protect the children and solve the mystery, Emily knew she needed to uncover the truth about the mansion's curse before it was too late. The tension was mounting, and each night seemed to bring new horrors, drawing her ever closer to the dark truth the mansion hid. Determined to unravel the mansion's secrets, Emily spent the following days immersed in research. She began investigating the Hawthorne family's old records, found in a dusty chest in the library. She discovered that the mansion had belonged to the family for generations and that many tragedies had occurred there. Death, madness, and disappearances were common in the accounts. Emily visited the nearby village and spoke with the locals. Many refused to talk about the mansion, their faces pale with fear at the mention of the Hawthorne name. However, an old lady named Agnes, who seemed to know more than she wanted to admit, finally shared some stories. She told that Lady Eleanor Hawthorne had lost her young son, William, under mysterious circumstances. After his death, Eleanor was seen wandering the gardens, murmuring incantations and performing strange rituals. Emily returned to the mansion with this new information, convinced that the key to freeing the troubled spirits was related to Eleanor's son. She decided to investigate the garden, where many believed Eleanor had performed her rituals. Armed with a lantern, she began to explore the neglected area at dusk. The overgrown bushes and twisted trees created an almost suffocating atmosphere. As she walked, she found a small gravestone hidden under the dense vegetation. The name William was engraved on the stone, along with a date that matched the accounts of Eleanor's son's death. Emily knelt beside the gravestone, feeling a heavy presence around her. Suddenly, the wind began to blow furiously, and she heard a faint, almost imperceptible whisper, as if someone were trying to speak to her. Feeling she was close to something important, Emily began to dig around the gravestone, finding a small rusty metal chest. Inside were William's personal belongings: a toy soldier, a lock of hair, and a storybook. Among these items was also a silver amulet with unknown inscriptions. When she touched the amulet, Emily had a vivid vision. She saw Lady Eleanor crying desperately as she performed a ritual around her son's gravestone, trying to bring him back to life. However, instead of returning William, the ritual opened a portal to something dark and malevolent, trapping the spirits in the mansion. Emily knew she had to find a way to undo the ritual and free the trapped spirits. She returned to the mansion, determined to discover how to use the amulet to break the curse. She felt that time was running out, and the spirits were becoming increasingly restless and aggressive. The malevolent presence in the house was growing, and each step brought her closer to an inevitable confrontation with the horrors haunting Hawthorne Mansion. That night, the supernatural events reached a new peak of intensity. Emily woke up to terrifying screams echoing through the mansion. She ran to the children's room and found Sarah huddled in a corner, trembling with fear. Thomas was missing. Desperation took over Emily as she frantically searched for him. As she traversed the dark corridors, she felt a malevolent presence around her. The whispers intensified, turning into cries of pain and suffering. Emily knew she had to act quickly before something terrible happened to Thomas. Following a dark intuition, she headed to the attic, a place she had avoided since her arrival due to the oppressive atmosphere emanating from it. Upon opening the attic door, she was greeted by a biting cold and an almost tangible darkness. The lantern barely illuminated the environment, but she managed to see Thomas, standing in the center of the attic, with glazed eyes and a vacant expression. Beside him, the spectral figure of Lady Eleanor materialized, her empty eyes fixed on Emily. "Eleanor, please let him go," pleaded Emily, holding the silver amulet tightly. Lady Eleanor seemed to hesitate for a moment, but soon her expression twisted in anger. "You don't understand. I just wanted my son back." Her voice was a desperate echo from times past. Emily, despite her fear, held her ground. "I know what you did, and I know you didn't mean to cause this, but you must release these souls. Let them rest in peace." Lady Eleanor's spirit advanced, and the environment around Emily began to distort as if reality were unraveling. Remembering Agnes's words and Eleanor's diary, Emily began to recite an incantation she found in the notes, holding the amulet high. The words resonated through the attic, and an intense light emanated from the amulet. Lady Eleanor screamed, a sound mixing pain and relief. The shadows around began to dissipate, and the cries of the trapped spirits turned into sighs of relief. The heavy, suffocating air began to clear, and Lady Eleanor's figure began to fade, leaving an expression of gratitude and sadness. Thomas collapsed to the floor, unconscious but alive. Emily ran to him, hugging him tightly. She felt Sarah's presence, who had followed Emily to the attic, and together, the three left that cursed place. The path back seemed less oppressive, as if the mansion was finally free from its curse. Emily knew the ritual had worked, but she also knew that the echoes of the past would always remain in some way. The mansion, though still gloomy, seemed less threatening. She took Thomas to bed and covered him, feeling a peace she had not experienced for a long time. That night, for the first time, Emily slept deeply, undisturbed by whispers or screams. She knew there was more to uncover about the mansion's secrets, but for now, at least, the nightmare was over. With the temporary relief from the supernatural activities, Emily decided to take advantage of the calm to further explore the garden where she had found William's gravestone. She felt there were still secrets buried there, waiting to be discovered. Taking a shovel and a lantern, Emily began to dig near the gravestone. As she dug, the sound of metal scraping against the earth was almost hypnotic. The lantern's light cast dancing shadows on the surrounding trees, creating an atmosphere of tension and suspense. After what seemed like an eternity, the shovel hit something hard. With trembling hands, Emily cleared the earth to reveal an old wooden box, sealed with a rusty padlock. Back at the mansion, Emily carefully opened the box. Inside, she found a collection of strange objects. Black candles, a ceremonial dagger, and several scrolls with inscriptions in an unknown language. There was also a golden medallion with the symbol of a pentagram and a small notebook filled with drawings and formulas. Flipping through the book, Emily discovered it belonged to Lady Eleanor. The notes revealed disturbing details about necromancy rituals and Eleanor's desperate attempts to bring her son back from the dead. The last diary entry was particularly unsettling. The portal was opened, but something came through, something evil. I am trapped in my own mistake. Emily realized that the objects in the box were components of a specific ritual Eleanor had attempted. The combination of these items seemed to be the key to closing the portal she had opened. She felt a mixture of hope and terror at understanding that she had the means to end the curse definitively, but that the process would be dangerous. Determined to free the spirits once and for all, Emily prepared to perform the ritual. She gathered the necessary items and headed to the mausoleum, located in the most remote and gloomy part of the garden. The mausoleum, with its moss-covered walls and rusty iron doors, exuded an almost palpable presence of evil. Upon entering, she felt the air freeze around her. The environment was filled with echoes of laments and sighs from the imprisoned spirits. Emily arranged the items according to Eleanor's book instructions and began to recite the ritual words. The atmosphere grew increasingly heavy, and the shadows on the walls seemed to come alive, writhing and contorting. Suddenly, an invisible force pushed her against the wall, and Emily felt intense pain course through her body. The candles went out, and the silence was broken by a high-pitched scream, seeming to come from all sides. Fighting against fear and pain, Emily continued to recite the words, holding the medallion firmly. A bright light emanated from the center of the mausoleum, growing in intensity until everything around was bathed in a blinding clarity. The screams and laments of the spirits intensified, reaching a climax before abruptly ceasing. When the light finally dimmed, Emily fell to her knees, exhausted, but feeling a deep peace in the environment. The spirits were freed, and the Hawthorne Mansion curse was broken. Emily knew the journey was over, but the scars of the experience would stay with her forever. She slowly stood up, feeling the cold night breeze as a sign of renewal and hope. As Emily regained her composure, a profound silence took over the mausoleum. The feeling of relief was momentary, for one last challenge awaited. A figure emerged from the darkness, gradually manifesting until it took the form of Lady Eleanor. But this was not the same Eleanor Emily had confronted before. There was something more sinister and powerful about her now. Eleanor's eyes shone with intense malevolence, and a deep, echoing voice came from her mouth. "You may have freed the spirits, but it is not over. I was consumed by the evil I summoned, and now I will be the eternal guardian of this place." Emily, feeling a wave of dread, knew she could not flee. This was the final confrontation, the ultimate test of her courage and determination. She grabbed the silver amulet she still held, feeling its comforting warmth in her hands, and faced the spectral figure. "You don't need to be the guardian of this place, Eleanor. There is still a way to find peace. You have to forgive yourself and release what remains of your humanity." The entity laughed, a sound that reverberated through the mausoleum walls. "Peace? I am the embodiment of torment. I will never have peace." Emily closed her eyes and focused on Eleanor's diary words, the hopes and regrets of the woman who had become a vengeful spirit. She knew the key to freeing Eleanor lay in reconciling her pain. "You loved your son, and your pain held him here, but it doesn't have to be this way. He deserves rest, and so do you." With these words, Emily began to recite a liberation prayer, a sincere plea for compassion and forgiveness. The amulet's light grew in intensity, bathing the mausoleum in radiant brightness. Eleanor began to scream, a sound of agony and resistance, but the light continued to envelop her. Emily stood firm, reciting the words with all her heart, feeling William's presence, Eleanor's son, beside her, as if he too were helping. Eleanor's figure began to change, her expression of hatred softening to one of deep sadness and, finally, acceptance. The amulet's light intensified until Eleanor's spectral form was completely enveloped and then disappeared, leaving behind a sense of peace and relief. Emily fell to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. She felt a small hand touch hers, and looking up, saw William's image, now at peace, smiling at her before gently fading into the air. With the curse broken and the spirits freed, the mansion began to change. The oppressive atmosphere dissipated, and a soft light began to penetrate the once dark and somber corridors. Emily, with a light heart, knew her mission was complete. She took Thomas back to his room, where Sarah awaited, relieved to see her brother safe and sound. The children, still shaken, felt the change in the house and began to relax, realizing the horrors had finally ended. Emily, now stronger and more resilient, decided to stay in the mansion to care for the children, honoring the memory of those who had suffered there. She knew the house, despite everything, still had a rich and significant history, and that she could transform that place into a safe and welcoming home. Months passed, and the Hawthorne Mansion began to be restored. The walls were cleaned, the gardens revitalized, and a new breath of life permeated every corner of the house. Emily, Sarah, and Thomas found a new routine, one not haunted by shadows of the past, but illuminated by the hope of the future. Emily reflected on the lessons she had learned, the importance of forgiveness, the strength to face the unknown, and the power of giving voice to the forgotten. She knew the Hawthorne legacy would live on, not as a tale of terror, but but as a story of redemption and courage. On a sunny day, while tending the garden, Emily found a new diary with a worn leather cover. Opening it, she saw it was a continuation of Eleanor's notes, a tale of peace and hope. She felt a deep connection with the woman who, despite all the mistakes, had found redemption in the end. The mansion was now a symbol of rebirth, a place where light had prevailed over darkness. Emily knew the journey was not entirely over, but she was ready to face any future challenges with the strength and wisdom she had gained.